The chamber was a monument to sterile perfection. High above the polished obsidian floor, the dome ceiling of the exoplanetary zoning board's grand hall shimmered with the cold, algorithmic glow of 1,000 holographic ordinances, each one a meticulously crafted cage for some unruly corner of the galaxy. The air smelled faintly of ionized metal and something else, something antiseptic, as if the Kuvith Collective had scrubbed the very atmosphere of unpredictability. High Arbiter, Vexlarn floated into position at the central podium, his elongated limbs folding with the precision of a calibrated instrument. His carapace, a sleek, iridescent exoskeleton that marked his rank, refracted the chamber's light into razor-sharp patterns across the assembled delegates. To his left, the Caith Moran delegation sat rigid, their crystalline forms clicking softly in disapproval. To his right, the Vithuri undulated in their nutrient tanks, their tentacles flicking as they parsed the coming decree. And, directly before him, in a cluster of seats conspicuously devoid of aesthetic harmony, sat the humans. Elias Mercer, Earth's lead diplomat, leaned back in his chair as if he hadn't a care in the galaxy. His boots were propped on the edge of the Kivith-provided data terminal, scuffing its pristine surface. Next to him, Dr. Him. Lian Wen kept her expression neutral, but her fingers tapped an irregular rhythm against her thigh, a human tell, something the Quavith had yet to catalog. Delegates of the Exoplanetary Zoning Board, Vexlarn began, his voice a harmonic oscillation designed to convey absolute authority. This session is convened to address a matter of galactic stability. A hologram flickered to life above the podium, a rotating model of human-colonized worlds, each tagged with crimson markers. Designation: non-persistent zones. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Mercer didn't move. Analysis confirms that human persistence, defined as uncontrolled expansion, adaptive resilience, and refusal to adhere to standardized population decay models, constitutes a disruptive anomaly. Vexlarn's mandibles flexed. Your species' tendency to endure where others would logically perish has introduced unacceptable variables into the collective's ecosystem management protocols. Ongwin's tapping stopped. Gee. Mercer's grin didn't waver. So let me get this straight, he drawled. You're outlawing not dying? A ripple of static passed through the Kuvith delegates. The Caith Moran emitted a high-pitched chime of disapproval. Vexlarn's ocular lenses narrowed. We are enforcing equilibrium. Your colonies on New Thessaly, Tarsus 9, and the Kepler 86F cluster exceed permissible biomass thresholds by 47%. Your settlements rebuild within standard disaster reclamation windows. He paused, as if the next word pained him. Improvisational architecture violates 17 zoning ordinances. Mercer swung his boots off the terminal and stood, rolling his shoulders like a man preparing for a bar fight. See? That's the thing about equilibrium, High Arbiter. It assumes everything wants to stay in balance. He gestured to the hologram. We don't. Failure to adhere will result in structural remediation. A hush. Even the Vithuri stilled their tentacles. Wynn finally spoke, her voice quiet but precise. By remediation, you mean orbital sterilization, Vexlarn confirmed. Mercer's grin turned feral. Well then, he reached into his coat and produced a crumpled packet of flimsy actual paper, a substance the Kuvith hadn't used in millennia. Let's talk appeals. The packet hit the podium with a sound like a slap. Vexlarn stared at it. This is not a negotiation. No, Mercer agreed. It's a zoning variance request. 12,000 pages of it, with appendices. He leaned in. You like protocols, High Arbiter? We've got protocols. For the first time in recorded history, the Exoplanetary Zoning Board's perfect silence cracked. Somewhere in the back, a Caith Moran delegate emitted an undignified screech. The war had begun. The chamber's acoustics had been designed to amplify the Qvith collective's pronouncements into thunderous decrees. Today, they carried only the rustle of flimsoplast and the arrhythmic tapping of human styluses. Elias Mercer watched, lips pressed into a thin line, as Lien Wen slid another stack of documents across the obsidian table. The pile teetered dangerously close to the edge, casting a shadow over High Arbiter Vexlarn's immaculate data slate. Appeal 9403B, Lien announced, her voice crisp, regarding the classification of New Thessalis tidal flats as non-persistent. She tapped the cover sheet. Our hydrological surveys indicate they're naturally shifting, so technically, the persistence is geological, not human. Vexlarn's cranial ridges darkened, a telltale sign of Quavith irritation. Your species settlements are the issue, Administrator Nguyen, not the terrain. Ah, Mercer leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then you'll want to review subsection 12.4 of the collective's planetary zoning code. He flicked a finger, and Kepler, their junior attaché, projected the relevant passage above the table. The glyphs glowed accusingly. Structures must remain static for a minimum of 5 solar cycles to qualify as persistent. Mercer grinned. Our settlements float. By definition, they're non-persistent. Somewhere in the tiered galleries, a Caith Moran delegate choked on its own respiratory fluid. The Qvith had expected surrender. They'd prepared for it. Dossiers on human psychological breaking points, contingency plans for mass deportations, even a pre-written speech about the merciful reintegration of wayward species. They had not prepared for footnotes. By the third cycle, the EZB's central servers groaned under the weight of human-generated documentation. Environmental impact studies for worlds the collective hadn't even cataloged yet. Zoning variance requests citing obscure precedents from long-dead civilizations. A particularly vicious 80,000-word treatise on the cultural heritage status of Tarsus Nines, illegally reinforced storm cellars, complete with holograms of grandmothers knitting in underground commons. This is obstruction, Vexlarn hissed during an emergency session, his voice stripped of its usual sonorous certainty. Due process, Mercer corrected. He'd stopped wearing his formal jacket days ago. It hung discarded over the back of his chair, sleeves rolled to the elbows. Dark circles bruised his eyes, but his grin was razor sharp. You wrote the rules, High Arbiter. We're just interpreting them. Meanwhile, on New Thessaly, the colonists played their own game. Translation error, Mayor Ruiz insisted, blinking up at the Qvith inspector with practiced innocence. The evacuation notice flapped in her hand, its glyphs shimmering. See? Your scribes wrote relocate all personnel. She gestured to the bustling hydroponic farms behind her. But we're farmers. Different administrative category. The inspector's eye stalks twitched. This is deliberate non-compliance. Ruiz shrugged. File a grievance. Though, she nodded to the horizon, where a dust storm churned. Might take a while for the paperwork to reach orbit. Back in the chamber, the Qvith's frustration curdled into something colder. You flood us with frivolities, Vexlarn snarled, slamming a taloned hand on the table. The impact sent a tremor through Mercer's abandoned coffee cup. This is not negotiation. It is chaos. No. Mercer straightened, the levity gone from his voice, its resistance. He spread his hands. You declared war on our existence, High Arbiter. Did you really think we'd fight it with guns? A hush fell. Even the ever-present hum of the chamber's climate system seemed to pause. Then, from the back of the gallery, a sound no Qvith assembly had ever heard, laughter. The Caith Moran delegate, the same one who'd screeched during Mercer's first rebuttal, was wheezing, its crystalline carapace vibrating with undignified mirth. Vexlarn's crest flushed crimson. The war had begun indeed. The Qvith inspectors arrived in gleaming orbital shuttles. their hulls polished to a mirror finish, as if the sheer luster of their bureaucracy could intimidate the unruly humans below. High Arbiter Vexlarn had handpicked them, zealous enforcers with a reputation for reducing entire civilizations to neatly filed non-compliance reports. Their mandate was simple: verify the dismantling of human settlements on Tarsus 9, New Thessaly, and a dozen other non-persistent zones. They did not expect the desert wind to greet them with a mouthful of sand. Inspector Kylvek, his chitinous plating already gritting with dust, stepped onto the cracked earth of Tarsus 9 and immediately regretted it. The settlement logs had listed this place as abandoned, a ghost town surrendered to the EZB's decree, yet the air smelled of baked bread and engine grease. His ocular receptors flickered, adjusting to the glare, and that's when he saw her. Mayor Leanne Ruiz stood at the edge of a perfectly empty square, her hands clasped behind her back, grinning like a woman who just won a bet. "Welcome, honored inspector," she called, her voice carrying over the wind. "On behalf of Tarsus 9's fully compliant population, I present to you," she swept an arm toward the desolate expanse, "our voluntary evacuation." Kylvek's mandibles twitched. The square was pristine, too pristine. Not a single footprint marred the dust. His antennae quivered, detecting the faintest hum of machinery beneath his feet. "Where," he hissed, "are your people?" Ruiz blinked. "Gone, of course. As per your regulations." She reached into her coat and produced an ornate brass key, dangling it between two fingers. Symbolic gesture, the key to our former city. Kylvek did not take it. Instead, he activated his thermal scanner and nearly dropped it. The readout flared with heat signatures, hundreds of them clustered beneath the surface. His voice dripped with disbelief. You buried your settlement?" Ruiz's grin widened. "Oh no, that would be persisting. We're simply geological enthusiasts, fascinated by caves. You'll find our recreational spelunking permits in order." 3 systems away, Inspector Verthak fared no better. The logs for New Thessaly had described a temperate river valley. What she found was a swamp, a technically uninhabitable methane-choked bog, its waters bubbling with toxins. Her shuttle's environmental alarms wailed as she descended, and she allowed herself a smug ripple of satisfaction. Finally, a species that knew its place. Then she spotted the lights. Not on the surface, no, that would be too obvious. They flickered under the water, glowing in rhythmic patterns, illuminating the silhouettes of domed structures beneath the murk. A comm signal crackled to life in her auditory receptors. "Ah, Inspector! Apologies for the hazardous conditions," a cheerful voice chirped. "We've been conducting independent studies on anaerobic architecture." Surely academic. "No living here, of course. That would be against the rules." Vertak's carapace darkened with rage. She jabbed a claw at her scanner. "Your academic study has a population density of 2,000 per square kilometer." "Population? Oh no. Those are automated research drones. Very advanced, almost lifelike." A pause. "You'd need a biometric warrant to prove otherwise." Back on the EZB's orbital citadel, Vexlarn stared at the reports flooding his terminal. Each one was a masterpiece of bureaucratic absurdity. A mining colony on asteroid GR441 had accidentally sealed itself inside a titanium shell, now classified as a non-living mineral deposit. A floating city on Pallas 6 had disassembled into 1,000 autonomous rafts, each legally designated as uninhabited maritime debris. And then there was the Piece de Resistance. A farming collective on Hestia Prime had genetically modified their crops to resemble weeds, thus rendering their fields ecologically insignificant. Vexlarn's crest flushed a violent violet. He turned to his aide, a lesser Queth, trembling under the weight of his glare. "They are mocking us." The aide hesitated. "Technically, sir, they're complying, just not in the way we..." Silence. Vexlarn's claws dented the console. This is not compliance. This is insurgency by paperwork. Across the chamber, Elias Mercer leaned against a pillar, sipping from a flask of something that smelled suspiciously like contraband whiskey. "You wanted us gone," he mused. "We're gone. Just not in the direction you expected." Vexlarn's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "You cannot hide forever, human." Mercer toasted him. "Watch us." On Tarsus 9, Inspector Kylvek finally lost his patience. He ordered his team to drill. If the humans were beneath the surface, he would unearth them. The drill bit screamed into the rock and snapped. Ruiz tisked. Forgot to mention, the Mises reinforced with salvaged starship hulls. Nasty stuff. You'll need a mining permit to proceed. She tossed him a datapad. Forms are on page 47. Kylvek stared at the screen. The permit required his biometric signature, a sworn affidavit of intent, and, his ocular receptors flickered, a processing fee. Above them, the wind howled, carrying the sound of something even more terrifying than human defiance. The grand compliance chamber of the Cuvith Collective hummed with the sterile energy of a surgical theater. High Arbiter Vexlar's carapace gleamed under the cold blue-white lights as he rose from his scythe throne, his 6 articulated limbs unfolding with the precision of a scalpel. The chamber's walls, smooth as polished bone, reflected the assembled bureaucrats, rows of chitinous, multi-eyed administrators, their mandibles twitching in anticipation. Vexlar's voice, a dry rasp like parchment dragged over glass, filled the chamber. This is no longer a matter of zoning violations. He tapped a claw against the central holodisplay, and a 3-dimensional rendering of human colonies bloomed above them. Tangled networks of habitats burrowed into asteroid belts, domes clinging to methane geysers, entire cities suspended in the acid storms of New Thessaly. "This is an infestation!" A murmur rippled through the assembly. Administrator Kethbeck, her antennae stiff with alarm, scuttled forward. "High Arbiter, surely infestation is hyperbolic. The humans are merely persistently non-compliant." "You mistake symptoms for the disease," Vexlarn snapped. The holodisplay shifted, zooming in on Tarsus 9's Mesa cities, officially dismantled, yet teeming with life inside hollowed rock. They do not simply resist, they metastasize. "Observe," the footage played, Cuvith inspectors in their gleaming exosuits standing befuddled outside a vacated settlement while thermal scans revealed a thriving subterranean labyrinth beneath their feet. Another clip showed Elias Mercer, Earth's chief diplomat, handing over a ceremonial key to a compliant ghost town with a smirk that could curdle plasma. "They treat our edicts as jokes," Vexlarn hissed. "Worse, they weaponize our own systems against us. Their appeals clog the arbitration queues. Their translation errors stall enforcement. They have turned bureaucracy into a siege engine." A tense silence followed. Then, from the back of the chamber, a young Covith clerk dared to voice the unthinkable. What if their persistence is not a flaw, but an evolutionary advantage we failed to account for? Vexlarn's ocular palps darkened. Advantage? They are chaos incarnate. They thrive in radiation pits. They repurpose wreckage into homes. They sing while repairing hull breaches in hard vacuum. He slammed a claw down, sending a cracked spider webbing across the holodisplay. "This cannot stand. We will reclassify them as a Class 12 structural hazard." The decree was immediate, brutal, and, unbeknownst to Vexlarn, catastrophically stupid. Elias Mercer leaned back in his chair, boots propped on the conference table, as the leaked footage of Vexlarn's speech played across the screen. "Structural rot?" he snorted. "That's the best they've got?" Beside him, Ambassador Ruiz, her prosthetic leg jury-rigged from salvaged Covith inspection drones, grinned. "They're scared. You don't call something rot unless you're afraid it'll spread." Mercer tapped a command into his datapad. Let's help it along. Within hours, edited clips flooded the galactic networks. Cuvith inspectors slipping on ice while trying to dismantle a vacant Arctic outpost. A team of administrators arguing over whether a camouflaged hydroponic farm counted as a structure. Vexlarn himself, mid-rant, accidentally referring to humans as the unkillable. The cherry on top? Arm? A side-by-side comparison. A Cuvith colony, abandoned after a single atmospheric fluctuation, next to a human settlement on a planet where it rained molten sulfur. The effect was electric. A hulking BRX mercenary squinted at the footage playing in a crowded cantina. Wait, the Cuvith want them gone because they live too hard. A chorus of disbelieving clicks and hisses rose from the assembled aliens, a motley mix of species long chafing under easy-B restrictions. A diminutive Evith scribe, her ink sacs pulsing with excitement, projected a shaky hand-drawn meme, a human child building a sandcastle atop a Cuvith zoning notice. The caption, in fractured galactic standard, persistence 1, permits 0. Laughter erupted, sharp and bright as a supernova. Vexlarn stared at the latest reports, his carapace dull with stress. Public approval of the EZB had plummeted 47% in 3 cycles. The Tikurar Collective had formally petitioned to adopt human-style adaptive zoning, and now, the unthinkable, a faction of Cuvith clerks had anonymously released a manifesto titled, In Praise of Stubbornness. Administrator Kaithvek approached, her voice hushed. High Arbiter, we must de-escalate. The metaphor has infected the discourse. The chamber held its breath. Somewhere, in the dark between stars, humanity kept building. Sikarar Kjes Jamanity kept building. The chamber's luminescent walls pulsed like a slow, arrhythmic heartbeat, casting jagged shadows across High Arbiter Vexlarn's rigid exoskeleton. The air hummed with the barely suppressed panic of a bureaucracy realizing, too late, that its prey had fangs. Administrator Kathek's voice was a blade wrapped in silk. High Arbiter, the metaphor has infected the discourse. She gestured to the holoscreens flickering around them, footage of the Tarsus 9 Mesa cities, now swarming with not just humans but others, the spindly Grexi tunneling into abandoned Cuvith resource depots, the amphibious Yulvathi raising their coral towers in forbidden tidal zones, all of them citing human persistence precedents in their appeals. Vexlarn's mandibles twitched. This is not discourse. This is contamination. Across the galaxy, the infection spread. Ambassador Elias Mercer stood atop a half-built watchtower, the skeletal frame groaning under his weight. Below, the colony thrived in glorious defiance. Fields of genetically modified wheat swayed where the EZB had decreed only barren rock should exist, and children darted between prefab domes painted to look like natural geological formations. Ruiz, the settlement's chief engineer, handed him a steaming mug of something that smelled like diesel and optimism. They're calling it the The Yulvathi just sent us a thank you note. Turns out, our misinterpretation of their tidal restrictions inspired them to reclaim their old spawning grounds. Mercer grinned. Nothing like a little creative reading. Then the sky screamed. A Cuvith dreadnought tore through the atmosphere, its obsidian hull blotting out the sun. The message blared from every comms channel. Final compliance warning. Evacuate or face structural remediation. Ruiz spat into the dust. They really don't get it, do they? Kaithvek's secondary eyes flickered with distress as the reports flooded in. The Grexi are repurposing our orbital silos into apartments. The Nixith are, by the void, filing permits to legalize their squatter settlements. Vexlarn slammed a chitinous fist onto the console. Enough! Burn New Thessaly to bedrock. Let the galaxy see what happens to persistence. A junior clerk, their carapace dull with exhaustion, dared to speak. High Arbiter, what if they broadcast it? The horror dawned on Vexlern like a supernova. Humanity wouldn't just die, they'd make it art. Mercer adjusted his collar, the live feed drone buzzing at his shoulder. You getting this, Ruiz? The engineer waved from a trench where a dozen colonists were, against all logic, planting tomatoes. Oh, they're getting it. Whole damn galaxies getting it. The dreadnoughts targeting lasers painted the settlement in lurid red. Mercer cleared his throat, addressing the drone with the cheerful malice of a man holding a royal flush. Attention, Exoplanetary Zoning Board. As per Galactic Statute 47B, subsection Emergency Horticultural Rights, we hereby declare this bombardment zone a community garden. He plucked a seedling from his pocket and shoved it into the dirt. Try explaining that to the press. Behind him, the colonists began to sing. Casevex's voice cracked. Abort the strike! The Thalassian Concord just invoked humanitarian observer status. They're live streaming the feed. Vexlern watched, paralyzed, as the holoscreen split into 1,000 windows, Grexy miners cheering in repurposed bunkers, Yulvathi elders weeping over reclaimed temples, and his own clerks, their faces hidden but their voices unmistakable, whispering, "Look at them, they're beautiful." The junior clerk's claws danced across the console. Targeting systems malfunctioning. How unfortunate. The dreadnought's weapons powered down. Somewhere, in the dark between stars, humanity kept building. The chamber aboard the Quivith dreadnought Judgment of Perfect Order was silent, save for the faint rhythmic hum of failing systems. High Arbiter Vexlarn's 4 hands hovered over the sterilization console. His carapace flushed an ugly shade of violet, the Quivith equivalent of a sweating, trembling rage. On the view screen before him, New Thessaly's colonists knelt in the blast zones, their hands black with soil as they planted what looked like flowers in the target grid, and they were singing. The feed, broadcast live across every open channel in the galaxy, showed a row of human children weaving garlands of woven scrap metal, improvised radiation shielding, no doubt, into something resembling a festival decoration. A woman with sun-leathered skin and a prosthetic arm stood at the center, leading the chorus in a warbling, off-key rendition of "We Shall Not Be Moved." Vexlarn's mandibles twitched. This is not compliance. Beside him, Sub-Arbiter Clixt, whose carapace had taken on a distinctly gray pallor over the last cycle, hesitated. Technically, High Arbiter, they have vacated all structures as ordered. The edict said nothing about soil utilization. A murmur rippled through the command staff. One of the junior tacticians, a Yulvathi seconded to the collective, made a soft clicking noise that might have been a suppressed laugh. Vexlarn whirled. You find this amusing? The Yulvathi dipped their head, but their voice was steady. I find it educational. My people once believed the Quivith could not be defied. Now I see other possibilities. The screen flickered. A new window opened. Elias Mercer's face, grinning from some hidden bunker on New Thessaly. Arbiter, lovely weather for orbital bombardment, isn't it? Shame about your targeting systems. Almost like the universe itself objects. Vexlarn's claws sank into the console. This farce ends now. Manual override. Prepare the apologies, High Arbiter. The voice came from the engineering pit. A Quivith technician, one of his own, stood with their back deliberately turned. Regulation 94.3 prohibits kinetic strikes on zones with active cultural ceremonies. It's, your amendment, sir. To prevent excessive disruption. The chamber froze. Mercer's grin widened. Oh, that's rich. You're hoist on your own petard. Vexlarn's carapace darkened to near black. He could feel it. The unraveling. The Dreadnought's crew shifting on their feet. The way Click's claws tapped a nervous staccato against their data slate. The Yulvathis barely concealed smirk. And the humans. Always the humans. On screen, the colonists had begun dancing. A man missing half his face from some forgotten frontier accident spun a child in the air, laughing as she shrieked with delight. A group of elders passed around a flask, their laughter rough and unbroken. They were happy. In the face of annihilation, they were happy. Clix exhaled sharply. High Arbiter, perhaps we should? No. Vexlarn's voice was a blade. We are the Quivith Collective. We do not yield to weeds. But the console lights were blinking out one by one. Systems failing. Circuits melting. The Dreadnought shuddered as something deep in its core resisted. Mercer leaned closer to his camera. You don't get it, do you? This was never about beating you. It was about outlasting you. While you were busy writing edicts, we were learning to breathe poison and eat radiation. Your rules are paper. We're stone. A chime sounded, an incoming transmission from the collective's central hub. The message was brief, brutal. Vexlarn's mandibles clicked uselessly. This is treason. Click straightened. No, High Arbiter. This is politics. The view screen split. New Thessaly's defiance on one side. On the other, 1,000 other worlds. Tarsus 9's Mesa cities glowing defiantly in the dusk. The Yulvathi tearing down Easy B restriction sigils with their bare claws. A dozen minor species flooding the bureaucracy with petitions stamped human precedent. The galaxy was watching, and the galaxy was learning. Vexlarn's claws flexed. For the first time in his impeccably ordered existence, he had no protocol for this, no regulation, no answer. Mercer's voice was soft now, almost pitying. You can't outlaw persistence, Arbiter. It's what life then? From the engineering pit, a single, deliberate snick, the sound of a primary ignition circuit disengaging. The Dreadnought's weapons went dark. Clix bowed. With respect, High Arbiter, I believe we're dismissed. 3 cycles later, the Exoplanetary Zoning Board dissolved in a whirlwind of scandal and resignations. The Quivith Collective, its reputation in tatters, retreated to its core systems to reassess galactic engagement priorities. A memo later leaked, revealing the reassessment consisted mostly of panicked debates about how to contain the human contagion. It was not encouraging. Elias Mercer was last seen on New Thessaly helping rebuild a schoolhouse that had accidentally expanded into a formerly restricted lava plain. When asked by a reporter if humanity had won, he shrugged. Won? They just stayed. And somewhere, in the dark between stars, a Yulvathi child scratched the first line of a new constitution into a wall, right over the faded Quavith zoning notices. Somewhere, a Tarsus 9 engineer repurposed a Dreadnought scrap into irrigation pipes. Somewhere, the universe tilted, and humanity kept building,